Hey guys, this is Brother Ray Jones with the First Church of God in Princeton, West Virginia. I want to welcome you to our midweek Bible study. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be a part of this time of online learning and growing together. I'm thrilled that you're letting me be a part of your spiritual development, and I'm grateful that you're being a part of mine as well. We've been studying the life of Jesus Christ, and there is no greater life to study than his. And one of the resources that I've used to put these lessons together is Chuck Swindoll's book called Jesus, the Greatest Life of All. If you have not read that book, I would encourage you to do so. As we work our way through this particular series, we have studied so much about Jesus' life, and we've talked about how he came into this world. We talked about his family, his upbringing. We talked about what little we know about his teenage years. And then we've covered how he's put his team together, and he's gathering these 12 closest followers who are going to be entrusted with fulfilling his ongoing mission, or spreading the word of his ongoing mission anyway. Jesus fulfilled his own mission, but then he gave us a mission to fulfill, which is to go tell others about him. Well, tonight, as we continue the study of Jesus' life, we are going to begin looking at how Jesus was a miracle worker. Much of our study is going to be coming out of the book of John. The first text we'll look to is John 2, verses 1 through 11. So go ahead and be turning to John 2 and finding that portion of Scripture, and then we will look at some others as we go through the course of part 1 of this study. So Jesus was indeed a miracle worker. Well, we need to understand that when you read through the Bible, in both the Old and the New Testament times, there were magicians who posed as miracle workers. All the way back in Exodus, when you read about Moses, you find out that Pharaoh had some magicians who held their staffs that turned into snakes, similar to Moses and the miracle that he performed there. Then, if you read in the book of Acts, it speaks of a guy named Simon the sorcerer who eventually became a believer. And Simon and others like him were able to perform acts that many in that day believed to be miraculous. Most of them, if not all of them, really were just magic tricks. However, Jesus did more than just do some magic tricks. He did what was truly miraculous. He was known as a miracle worker, and there was a good reason for that, because Jesus actually performed miracles. And we're going to take a closer look tonight at some of those. Again, we'll be looking in the book of John. So if we want to define a miracle, by definition, it is a dramatic, undeniable act of God in which he demonstrates indisputable authority over the universe he created and continues to rule. Let me read that again. A miracle is the dramatic, undeniable acts of God in which he demonstrates indisputable authority over the universe that he created and continues to rule. Luke highlighted one simple truth in Luke 1:37. He says, nothing will be impossible with God. My friends, God does the impossible because all things are possible with him. So we're going to look tonight at how Jesus performed some miracles. And the first one that we see is how Jesus had power over even the trivial things in life. And that begins in John, the 2nd chapter, beginning at verse 1. Let's read verses 1 through 11. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Now, both Jesus and his disciples were invited to the wedding. And when they ran out of wine, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does your concern have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Whatever he says to you, do it." Now there were set there 6 water pots of stone, according to the manner of purification of the Jews, containing 20 or 30 gallons apiece. Jesus said to them, "Fill the water pots with water." And they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, "Draw some out now and take it to the master of the feast." And they took it. And when the master of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine, and did not know where it had come from, but the servants who had drawn the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom. And he said to him, "Every man at the beginning sets out good wine, and when the guests have well drunk, then the inferior. You've kept the good wine until now. This beginning of signs Jesus did in Cana of Galilee and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. So here we see what is the first recorded miracle of Jesus. This is after he has been baptized and he's gone out into the wilderness to be tempted for 40 days and 40 nights. He's called his disciples together and he's beginning his earthly ministry. And in doing this, he gets invited to a wedding. So he and his disciples go, and they're a part of this wedding feast. And we'll recall, as we've talked about a little bit about Jewish weddings before, but the weddings in Jesus' day took place over several days. So there was a lot of celebrating going on, and there would have been a lot of wine, that it would have been customary to have a lot of wine at this particular gathering. Now, wine to a Jewish wedding is like cake to an American wedding. In our American context, we know that when somebody gets married, it is very traditional to have wedding cake. In Jesus' day, they had wine. And it would have been very taboo to run out of wine. It would have been an embarrassment to the couple and to the groom's family in particular, to everybody involved who was a part of the family. It would have just been one of those things that you just didn't do, okay? It was a social taboo. It was a social embarrassment. Well, that's what's happening at this particular gathering. More people evidently showed up than they anticipated. And maybe you've been there and done that, okay? I know when we put together church dinners, we usually try to prepare for a certain amount of people and make sure we have plenty of food. But there have been some scenarios I've been in when way more showed up than we anticipated, and boy, you just hate for that to happen. Well, that's kind of what was going on here. And imagine again, this was going on over several days' period of time. So Mary's there, and she's been read in on what's going on, okay? The ladies usually take up those social cues way quicker than the men do. So Mary realized, oh wow, this couple at their wedding, you know, they're just in love with each other, and they want to start their life out together, and they want everybody to celebrate and have a good time, and they're about to be humiliated because they've run out of wine. So Mary goes to Jesus and says, you can do something about this. She believed in her son, not only because he was her son, but because she knew better than anybody did he was no ordinary man. And Jesus actually argued with her a little bit. Now, understand the terminology that he used, as it's quoted in John, is, woman, my hour's not come yet. I'm not supposed to be doing this. And when he said woman, it was actually a term of endearment. He was not being disrespectful to his mother, okay? So we read that in modern American culture and we think, wow, Jesus was getting a little sassy with his mom. No, he was honoring and respecting her. And she was encouraging him to do what she knew he could do. She was actually urging him on just a little bit to say, come on, now's the time. This is a great opportunity to show your closest followers that you're more than just an ordinary man. And, by the way, you can help this couple out in the process. So she goes and she tells the servants, hey, whatever my son tells you to do, I want you to do it. Jesus then follows up, and he tells them to fill up these water pots. Now, we need to understand something. These water pots were used for washing feet, okay? These were the number 9 wash tub, that people used to have on the farm. These were, the equivalent of that. These were done for used for menial tasks. These were large mop buckets, if you will. And they held anywhere from 20 to 30 gallons apiece. We'll just split the difference in that and say 25 gallons of water. So the servants were told to fill those things up to the brim with water. And then Jesus went and miraculously, he prayed, he did whatever he did, and miraculously that water in those water pots that were used for foot washing now turned into wine. They took some to the master of the ceremony. The master of the ceremony took a drink of it and he complimented actually the bridegroom. He said, hey, we've been partying for days now. We've been celebrating for quite some time. Most people put the good stuff out first, but you've saved the best for last. And what was going to be turned into a social embarrassment and a humiliation for these young couples starting out in life turned into one of the highest points of the entire ceremony and the beginning of their life together. And it's all because Jesus did something miraculous. Now, here's the cool thing. Jesus didn't heal somebody for his first miracle. He didn't set somebody free from demon possession for his first miracle. He didn't save someone's soul for his first miracle. He saved a couple from embarrassment. And he showed that even in something somewhat trivial, maybe, he has power over that. And he's concerned about even the trivial things. Jesus didn't have to do this miracle. He doesn't have to do any miracle, but especially we can make a good argument, he didn't have to do this one. This is just a young couple, and if they would have had a little bit of embarrassment on their wedding day, that wouldn't have been the end of life for them. They would have gotten over that. But the point is this: Jesus showed concern over something even minor and trivial by a lot of standards. Now, it wasn't minor to that couple or their families, but it might have been minor to everybody else, okay? Well, what this is showing me, and I hope it's showing you as well, is that Jesus is concerned about the things that concerns us, and he may even intervene in those things. So just let me ask you this. Are there any trivial things in your life that you've been praying about? And maybe you've been wondering, should I even be praying about this? I want you to rest assured tonight. Jesus is concerned about anything that's concerning you. And if there happens to be some things concerning that are bothering you that you really don't need to be bothered about, don't even worry about whether or not you ought to be bothered. Just take it to the Lord and let him help you through that. He may just do the miraculous in your trivial situation. I remember hearing the story of a man that I've heard speak a few times and held in high regard through the Church of God Reformation movement. His name was Arlo Newell. He was doing a revival at a particular church, and he was staying with the pastor and his family. And the pastor's daughter's dog had run away. The dog was missing. And the dad of the home, the minister of the church, was basically telling his daughter, we got a revival going on. We're busy. We're not going to go look for this dog. Just come on. The dog will be okay or whatever. Don't worry about the dog. And Arlo Newell spoke up and said, brother, this is concerning this girl. And let's just take a moment right now and pray that this dog will come home. So Brother Arlo Newell just led that family and that little girl in a moment praying that her lost dog would find its way home. And the next night, the dog came home. Now, that is a very heartwarming story. And it's a great example of simply how I believe God is concerned about even the smallest of matters. Anything concerning to us is worth taking to the Lord in prayer, and he will help us with that. Jesus' first miracle points us in that direction, okay? Well, there's another miracle that Jesus does where he shows he has power over distance. It's found in John, the 4th chapter, verses 46 through 54, and it's the healing of a wealthy man's son. Let's read that portion of Scripture. So Jesus came again to Cana of Galilee, where he had made water into wine. And there was a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum. When he heard that Jesus had come out of Judea into Galilee, he went to him and implored him to come down and to heal his son, for he was at the point of death. And Jesus said to him, unless You people see signs and wonders, you will by no means believe. The nobleman said to him, Sir, come down before my child dies. Jesus said to him, Go your way, your son lives. So the man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him, and he went his way. And as he was now going down, his servants met him and told him, saying, Your son lives. Then he inquired of them the hour when he got better, and they said to him, Yesterday at the 7th hour the fever left him. So the father knew that it was at the same hour in which Jesus said to him, Your son lives. And he himself believed, in his whole household. Then this again is the second sign Jesus did when he had come out of Judea into Galilee. So look at this second miracle that's taking place. There's a little more at stake here. There's a man's son who is sick, terminally sick, we believe. And we need to understand that the nobleman that comes to Jesus comes to him in Capernaum, or at Cana rather, and he's from Capernaum. And Capernaum is about 20 miles from Cana. Now, that's not necessarily a big deal if you're hopping in a vehicle and driving. But when you're walking, that's a pretty big deal. That is a long way to go, okay? So Jesus and his disciples and this dad are in Cana, but the need is 20 miles away in Capernaum. Well, Jesus, that's not an issue for Jesus, and that's what this miracle shows us. He knows no distance. Well, this nobleman was a man of reasonable wealth and influence. He had means about him. He knew people, and he had connections. He could get things done. He had material wealth. He could pay for things to be done. But he was facing a situation where his money and his influence really didn't count. He was in over his head. And all of us, at some point or another, are going to be in over our heads. We're going to find out, quite honestly, control is an illusion. Now, it's okay to have control of certain things. When you go driving your vehicle, I hope you maintain control of that vehicle. But you know, if something in the steering system critically failed in that vehicle, you could be turning that wheel and it's not going where you want it to go. You're no longer maintaining control, all right? Well, I'm here to tell you, my friends, excuse me, control is an illusion. We are given limited control and influence over certain things, but then we can and probably one day will face things that we have absolutely no control over. And God still has control over those things, even so, okay? So this nobleman had reasonable wealth and influence, but he had no control over what was happening with his son. He was, however, persistent in his request that Jesus heal his son. And Jesus then just makes a statement about how, if you don't see signs and wonders, you're not going to believe. And what he was doing in that statement, honestly, was compelling faith and testing to see if this man had faith. Well, this nobleman was a parent. This was his son who was hurting. And I'm here to tell you, my friends, we might not get passionate about too many things, but parents get passionate about their kids, and rightfully so. When you have kids, you'll go to the mat for them. When you have kids and they're hurting, you will move heaven and earth to try to help them. Now, pardon me, I'm not talking about spoiling them. I'm not talking about going to bat for them when they're wrong. You need to correct them when they're wrong. You do need to stand up for them and support them in healthy and God-honoring ways. But part of that includes correcting them when they're wrong. But in this situation, this man's son was sick, and he was not giving up. He was imploring. He was at his wit's end, if you will. He was at the end of the rope. And when he was at the end of his rope and at the end of himself, and he exhausted everything that he could reasonably do, he went to Jesus. Because, my friends, when you get to the end of yourself, you're just now finding the beginning of Jesus, okay? So he goes to Jesus persistently asking that Jesus would heal him. And he says, I need you to heal my son. Well, Jesus gave the man an opportunity to believe. He said these very words, go your way, your son lives. Well, as Jesus said those words, that man that parent had the opportunity to decide, am I going to believe this and act on it, or am I going to disbelieve and lack faith? This man chose to believe. He believed the word of the Lord, and he obeyed the word of the Lord. He said, Jesus told him, your son lives, go home, go check on him. So that's what the man did. And when he's heading home, the next day, his servants come out to meet him, and he says, hey, man, your son's alive. And he's like, tell me when it was that he started getting better. And they told him the very hour that the fever broke was the same time that this guy was in Jesus' presence 20 miles away, talking to him, asking him to heal his son. I'm here to tell you today, my friends, this man believed on the Lord and acted on that belief. And we know from the last verses that we read that he and his household ended up believing as well, okay? So the question that we want to consider then is this: is there a need that you're praying for, nearby or even far away, that you want God to take care of? My friends, again, let me reiterate, when we pray, God knows no distance. We can pray about something here and God can touch somebody over there. Now, there's nothing wrong with bringing the need, like physically, say, to the church building and people coming together and praying there. But there are a lot of times when somebody is sick at the hospital or at their house or maybe halfway around the world, and we can pray here and God can work there. He does that on a regular basis. So tonight, if there's a need that's burdening you and it's right in your own household or 1,000 miles away or anywhere in between, I want you to have faith tonight. God can take care of that need. He has power over distance. Well, there's another miracle that we see, and it is in John, the 5th chapter, beginning at verse 1. And we see here how Jesus has power over time. This is the story of the lame man at the pool of Bethesda. Let's look at this one together. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool which is called in Hebrew Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of sick people, blind, lame, paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain time into the pool and stirred up the water. Then whoever stepped in first after the stirring of the water was made well of whatever disease he had. Now a certain man was there who had an infirmity 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been in that condition a long time, he said to him, do you want to be made well? The sick man answered him, Sir, I have no man to put me in the pool when the water is stirred up, but while I'm coming, another steps down before me. Jesus said to him, Rise and take up your bed and walk. And immediately the man was made well, and he took up his bed and walked, and the day was the Sabbath. The Jews therefore said to the man who was cured, It's the Sabbath, it's not lawful for you to carry your bed. He answered them, He who made me well said to me, Take up your bed and walk. Then they asked him, Who is this man who said to you, Take up your bed and walk? Then the one who had healed him did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn, a multitude being in that place. Afterwards, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, See, you have been made well. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you. All my friends, in this particular miracle, we see that Jesus has the power over time, something that's been going on for 38 years, according to this portion of Scripture in this man's life, was healed in a moment by the power of Jesus Christ. Now, when you look at this story, you see that the people in that area were putting their faith in a myth. They're at the pool of Bethesda, and there's the belief of the time that when the waters get troubled, that an angel had troubled those waters, and the first person among all the sick who are there who gets into the water after the troubling of the waters is the one who would be healed. Can you imagine what a scenario that would be? Can you imagine a bunch of people there, sick and afflicted, hoping for a cure, hoping to be the first one to get in whenever the waters are troubled? Can you imagine the competition that would be going on there? Can you imagine perhaps even one would be crawling over another, holding that one back, pulling them back so that they could get there first? My friends, what a desperate situation that would be. What a desperate condition this man was in. Jesus entered into that scene, and he finds a man, a specific man, who's been struggling for 38 years. That's a lifetime, my friends. 38 long years. And Jesus asked this man an important question. Do you want to be made well? Now that might be one of those nah-duh questions when you first hear it and listen to it. But there was actually significance behind this question. Jesus was assessing where the man was emotionally, spiritually, and even somewhat physically. He wanted to know what's going on. Do you really want to be made well? And the man's response indicated a question or an answer of a certain level of faith. And he said, I do want to be well, but I don't have anybody to help me get into the water first. And the implication that I read there is that maybe this man was saying, hey, could you help me get in the water first? He had at least enough faith to be reaching out for some help. And his answer indicated, yeah, he really did want to get better. Well, my friends, Jesus heard that and he did something far better than just help take him to the pool when the waters were troubled. He spoke the word to him and miraculously touched him. And instantaneously, this man who had been suffering for 38 years now became well. Think about that. He tells him to take up his bed and walk. And the guy immediately does so. And then Jesus just kind of goes back into the crowd. And here's this man not able to walk for 38 years, and he's jumping around, carrying his bed, ecstatic. And some religious leaders see him, and they happen on the scene and say, hey, what do you think you're doing? It's the Sabbath. You can't be carrying that bed around. And the guy's just so happy. He said, I'm really sorry, but the guy who just healed me said I need to take up my bed and walk. And, man, he healed me. I'll do whatever he says, okay? I'm going to be obedient to this guy. And they said, who was it that told you to break this law? And his response was, I really don't know. I didn't get a good look at him. Well, after those Pharisees get done with their reprimand, this man is going around probably still carrying his bed, and he's walking on his own power because Jesus healed him. But Jesus finds him in the temple, and he says, according to the scripture, hey, you've been made well. You've been made complete. And he goes on and adds these words that we should take note of as we close out tonight. Sin no more, lest the worst thing come upon you. This man's healing was done by the power of Jesus' name. Jesus just spoke to him and made him well. This man believed and received that healing. This man was able to do something miraculously, something he hadn't been able to do in 38 years. By the word of Jesus Christ, he did in that moment. He took up his bed and walked. Well, Jesus also looked at him and said, hey, you've been made well. Now, quit fooling around with that sinfulness, because sin will bring something even worse upon you than this physical illness. Now, we don't know exactly what Jesus might have been meaning there. It could be that a worse sickness could have come upon him. But what we do know with great certainty is that if we, even if we're healed of a physical illness, if we go headlong into sin willfully, continually, that's going to bring something way worse than just a physical illness in this world. It's going to bring a separation from God, an eternity in a place called hell. Oh, my friend, that is worse than any disease. Well, this man heard both commands as best we can tell. We know he heard the one to stand, take up his bed and walk, because he did that. And we're going to trust that he did the second as well. And we're going to trust this also. If Jesus can heal a man who's been lame for 38 years and give him the power to walk, and tells him to take up his bed and walk, he gives him the power to do it, and looks at him later and says, hey, don't go sin anymore. Quit fooling with that sin stuff. Do you not think Jesus would also give him the power to do that as well? I can't help but contend that that would be the case. So my friends, in this particular miracle, there's a miraculous healing, but there's also a command to go and be done with the sin business. And if Jesus is going to tell us to do that, he's going to give us the power to do that as well. So in this particular miracle, we see several things, but one of the things is he has the power over time. This man's been struggling with something for 38 years, and God set him free. Is there something that you've been struggling with for some time? Oh, my friend, would you take it to the Lord in prayer again? Would you just ask him maybe one more time to give you the healing you need? The situation that you're dealing with, the struggle that you have, whatever it may be, may you receive God's healing tonight and believe him for it one more time. Thank you for your time tonight. I hope you've been blessed by this. This is just the first part of at least a two-part series, but we're going to stop here for tonight just looking at these three miracles. There's more to come. We'll see you next week. God bless.